Let's act as we first.
Howdy, howdy.
I love the musical intro. Yeah, I feel like I should say, and the Oscar goes to. Yeah. Before we start, I have an ask, and I should preface that ask. On Wednesday, I gave a presentation on CRT or CSJ, critical social justice, and its detriments in K through 12 and college. During the Q&A, I had a dean tell me that everything I was saying was untrue, that I was basically making it up, and that you don't exist. So could you do me a favor and when I count to 3, say hello to this dean so that he knows you're here. I was going to ask you to say hello schmuck, but that's not a nice thing to do. So, what?
Can we say his name?
I would love to. But I would love to. He's good friends with Sal anyway, the person I talked about earlier. But we won't do that. He knows who he is. 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Did you hear that, schmuck?
Okay, so to keep with the theme of being problematic, I recently heard that the word gratitude and just gratitude is one of the things that is becoming problematic. So I would like to really get problematic by extending my gratitude to Parents Unite, to Erec, for you guys for showing up here after lunch. Thank y'all. And then, if you could join me in getting a little problematic, I want you to think about 1, 2, 3 things that you're grateful for. And jot those, if you got a pen, if you can jot that down. We're not going to do anything with it, but I just want you to, an expression of gratitude. And just think about how that feels, giving that gratitude and thinking about that. And as you're doing that, I'm Jason Littlefield, obviously, with Empowered Pathways. I'm a recovering public educator. I spent 20 years, thank you. I spent 20 years in the profession. I was a classroom teacher. I was a campus administrator. And for the past 7 years, I was a social and emotional learning specialist for Austin Independent School District. I'll go ahead and call them out. I'm no longer with them. I spent the last 3 years asking questions. What is going on? I think as professionals, we need to look at our approach. We're actually decreasing the social and emotional well-being of our teachers and our students. That questioning got me outcast, and I was cool with that. So I spent the last 2 years of my profession doing a sociological study because I was embedded with the woke. I've attended hundreds of hours of DEI training. I've read all the books. I've led professional development. And around 2017, I started thinking about how can we do this differently? And that's what we're going to go through today. And I will, as I'm going through this, I want you to understand that my colleagues, people that I had a deep friendship with from 2014 to 2017, until I didn't go along with the ideology, are seriously triggered and alarmed by what I'm saying, by what we're saying, and that's where we're at. That's how things are. Now, I would like for you to think about a skill, a mindset, something you would like to do and learn and grow. Is it you want to finally learn how to play the guitar? Do you want to learn how to deal with difficult people? This is a guide. It's called the Path AIM Goal Setting Sheet, and this is on our website as well. But I just want you, right now we're just going to worry about the set the intention, and I want you to think about something that you would really like to accomplish, something you would really like to do. Because empowered humanity theory is designed for whatever that is, for you to meet that. It's a goal setting sheet. And I believe that if we all are able to develop ourselves to our fullest ability, that is a really good way to fight back.
Okay. Divergent narratives.
Yeah.
And the impact of our humanity. Sorry, I'm just so proud of this.
Yeah. But first, we would like to talk about what is hindering, you already know, what is hindering our abilities to set those intentions and to grow as individuals, and it is the divergent narratives that we're all facing. Is there any truth to this? Right? It wouldn't be funny if it wasn't true, but this is where we're at, and I believe that the divergent narratives that we are in at this moment in history is the reason why things feel like this. Oh. Just kidding. Oh, sorry. Charles, earlier you asked, how do we shift the CRT conversation? This is something that I've been talking about and Eric's been talking about for a while, and we believe this is it. Right here. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, we just saw an insane Venn diagram just now, right? I grew up thinking the Venn diagram of conservative and liberal in the middle was classical liberal values. That's what we shared. No matter how much we argue, at least we had that. As you all know, that's going away. And in certain situations, it has gone away. So we wanted to help you visualize the distinction between classical liberal values and whatever's going on right now. There's all kinds of things you can call it. Wokeism, all right? Critical race theory or critical race theory inspired politics. What's
dangerous.
That? Yeah, dangerous. Here's one, stupid.
Trash. Sorry.
This is word association, you know? Garbage, CRT. But here we call it successor ideology.
One of the things, going through all of these anti-racism trainings and diversity, equity, and inclusion, I noticed that we weren't addressing issues of racism and issues of prejudice and issues of injustice. And I noticed, so I started doing my own research because I realized that the tool set that the public education and my team were working with were just tools purposed for destruction. And that's the important thing, right? I want to go back to this. So liberalism, the overall idea is that the individual is the moral worth of society. The individual has the right to live their life as long as they don't hurt people and develop themselves to their fullest potential. That's the meaning of life. The successor ideology, its purpose is just to destroy individual autonomy. It's just purpose for destruction. And once I figured that out, I started doing my own research. And if you look at this, you see that society is now organizing itself in a way that is cultivating prejudice. And every single one of us in this room, as lovely as we all have the capacity wired into us for prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. And that's the place where racism lives. That's the place where hate lives. That's the place where injustice lives. And as a society, in our school systems now, we're actually cultivating prejudice.
And what we want to do is, not ignore the fact that, we are humans and we have human nature, but to deal with it, to displace those ideas, to channel them into better ways of communicating and living well with each other. In my field, and once again, I'm referencing Asao Inoue, what we used to call individualism is now called hyper-individualism, because that's scarier and more negative. But it's the same thing. The issue with that, obviously, is that if we are ignoring our individuality, we're not going to be very good members of a group. People don't realize that. They focus on the communal and not the individual, and that is detrimental, and it's a big part of why we're going through what we're going through today.
And you just reminded me, as like relationship stuff, you can't be in a healthy relationship with others unless you are in a healthy relationship within yourself. And now we're destroying this. Yeah, it's a circle of dumb. And again, so this is out of Pennsylvania University, the positive psychology department. I just want to take note here that once again, as a society, we are cultivating decreased communication. We heard that from the students earlier. cultivating anger, sadness, guilt, shame. Anxiety has been mentioned many, many times this weekend. And think about the behaviors, the specific behaviors, the addictions, the depression, all of the yucky things that are part of the human experience that come from these emotions, that come from shame. We saw the mental health stats earlier this morning. I feel those are really similar to what's going on here. So my concern as a social and emotional learning specialist over the years, I was really concerned about what we are doing. And my concern started about 2017. I think that's a magic year for a lot of us in this room. And I was kind of pat on the back, you know, like, oh, Littlefield, it's going to be fine. Oh, maybe you'll be prophetic on all this one day, who knows? It was like, yeah, here we are. Do you have anything right here?
Yes. Once again, I want to mention that we're not talking about ignoring these feelings. These feelings are real. People have them, and they often have good reasons for having them. But they're not healthy. What emotional intelligence is all about is displacing, these emotions, not repressing them, not getting rid of them, not ignoring them, but displacing them, channeling them into something productive. We're not doing that. We're having our students embrace this, right? And to abide by what some people call a learned helplessness. That's the opposite direction of where we want to go.
Yep. So no matter what is in the heart of the artist, no matter how strong their desire to build, to reform, if the tools that they are using are purposed for destruction, they're only going to get destruction. And I feel that, Bob Ross, he looks really happy. He's not doing the happy trees because he has the wrong tools. And that is one of the messages that I'm really hoping to get out to educators and everybody, is that the tools we are using are purposed for destruction. The tools we are using are not just destruction of property as we've seen, but the destruction of individual autonomy. And I've heard a lot of concerns about our nation. I'm concerned about our nation. Eric and I, our concern now is the world, because we see this as a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And people that have yet to be born. The people born 20 years from today, that's who I'm really working forward and anxious about.
And I just want to say another thing about that previous slide. Destruction is ubiquitous, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard people like Bettina Love, the educational scholar, say, our job is to tear it down, let the next generation build it back up. You tear things down with that tool, right? And that's why it's hard to find a reasonable and logical person, amongst people who are abiding by critical social justice, or whatever you want to call it. You need reason and rationality to build things, right? To collaborate with other people, to be progressive. If you want to tear something down, you don't have to be reasonable. You just have to be destructive. So that's what I see when I look at this. And I still love Bob Ross.
So we're going to shift ahead, but before we shift ahead, if we could just pause where you're at, maybe take a deep breath, and then notice. What are your thoughts? How are you feeling? Just notice those sensations. So this is what we've been working on, and it kind of, what I found out this summer was that Erec was doing some kind of parallel work of what I've been doing, and this summer we met, and after like our second or third conversation, I was like, dude, you're gonna think this is super corny, but I feel like I've been looking for you for a long time.
Pitter patter.
So many of the ideas of the successor ideology were put into place, let's say, in the 1920s by the Frankfurt School. These social scientists sat around, pontificated, and figured out, how can we destroy society? And they gave us these tools. They gave us critical theory. They gave us many group identities in which intersectionality in 1989, Crenshaw really capitalized and put that Frankfurt School idea on steroids. So what we believe is that empowered humanity theory can also be one of those these social scientists sit around and pontificate. How can we liberate humanity? How can we make people happy? What tools can people and society have to increase personal well-being and societal cooperation? That is my passion in life, is how can I increase human potential and how can I increase societal cooperation? And that's the tools that we came up with.
Man.
Check it out.
Like Jason said, we were working on similar projects. I'm currently working on a book about empowerment theory, or empowered humanity theory. And I need to tell you, or remind you anyway, that I am a professor of rhetoric. I see this as a rhetorical endeavor. It's an endeavor about how we communicate, not just with each other, but with ourselves. So we have here the three components of empowered humanity: the intrapersonal, the behavioral, and the interactional. The intrapersonal is all about how we talk to ourselves. If you are aware of emotional intelligence, you know of the components of self-awareness and self-management. That's what the intrapersonal is all about. But I add to that, and I'm not the only one who's adding to this, there are people in my field who are doing work in what's called internal rhetoric, or intrapersonal rhetoric. What I see here is the need to talk to ourselves, or recognize how we're talking to ourselves. Is there negative emotionality in what we're saying? You know, are we really seeing things for what they are? Do we have positive self-regard? Right? These are important things if we're going to be upstanding members of society and healthy individuals. In order to abide by the interactional, which is about how we interact with other people, we have to be sound on the intrapersonal level. Otherwise, we're not entering into a conversation with an open heart, mind, and will, as Otto Schwarmer might say. We're entering into those conversations defending ourselves. We fall into defense mechanisms. We're protecting our egos, we're protecting our ideas, we're protecting the ways we were brought up, and we're projecting a lot of negativity onto those people who don't abide by that. Right? That is a lack of interpersonal awareness, and it makes for bad interactions. Lastly, the behavioral is about healthy collaboration and things like that, but also productive collaboration. How do we get together to get things done? Right? I'm often accused of ignoring the material realities of racism in this world, especially when it comes to something like redlining, for instance. However, my argument is that if you're not truly empowered, you're not going to do a good job of addressing those things. Somebody who has an adequate grasp of the intrapersonal, the interactional, and the behavioral is more likely to address those concerns in productive ways. They're not bringing the past with them. They're not bringing their negative emotionality with them, all right? They're open about it. They're working with other people. To be empowered is to be empowered.
So you see human dignity on these slides a lot. And I've recently heard that dignity is now being co-opted or hijacked by the movement as well, whereas just as short as 2019, some of my former colleagues were seriously triggered, and I'm talking amygdala hijacking triggered, and I got to leave the room when I would talk about human dignity, talking about common humanity. This right here, I've been told that obviously after I left, nobody wanted to have the conversation when I was there, but I was told that my belief in a pro-humanity, in a humanity-centered approach, caused harm throughout the Austin Independent School District. The message that I gave, they said, this is not, I don't want to debate or talk with you, I just want to unload on you. And I replied back, I said, can you please tell me who I harmed so that I can correct that? And that was never given. When I talk about dignity, I'd like to have a clear understanding of what that means, not just some crazy word or nebulous word. I talk about how do we separate the human from the being, because we're all human beings, right? What you're seeing here is my humanness, my personality, my biology, all of that is the human element. Underneath our human element is our being. And despite our biologies, despite our interest, where we live on the globe, all beings share two qualities. And that is the desire to avoid suffering and the desire to alleviate suffering of others when we encounter it. So when I talk about how do we navigate life through a dignity lens, that's what I'm talking about. And I've been blessed with a lot of difficult people in my life over the past couple of years. So this is something that I put in practice. In fact, I had one former colleague call me, and this is one of the woke people, and she also was extremely triggered one day when I used the word free society. That really did happen. But she called me and she said, you know what, Jason? She said, I want you to know that I have seen the isolation. I've seen how you've been treated over the years, and it hurts my heart. And I told her, I said, thank you. I appreciate that, but I don't take it personally. I said, I understand that that's what the ideology is designed to do. It's designed to erode relationships. It's designed to increase depression and anxiety and all of those things. And I honor all of those people as individuals despite of what they may have done to me. It's the ultimate turn the other cheek, right?
May I
Yeah.
say a couple things here? In my research and observations and, wait for it, lived experience, I've come to realize that a lot of what's going on in my field anyway isn't about reason, logic, rhetoric in a rhetoric field. It's about dignity. I talk about this in my previous book, and in my upcoming book, I'm a broken record about it. I see a lot of this as what I call a dignity grab. This is why you can justify something like ethnomathematics. Makes no sense, but dignity is there, right? This is why you can justify saying things like teaching standard English to black kids is inherently racist, because it's about dignity and acquiring something that people haven't had for far too long. Unfortunately, and I get that, but unfortunately, this has devolved into, in order for me to have dignity, you have to be humiliated yourself. You don't get dignity. You've had it too long. Or if you're black, you want to be the people who had it too long, right? The late Albert Ellis, the psychologist, called this masturbation. Things must be this way or that way for me to be happy.
Okay.
Masturbation,
Yeah.
Get it? I like devolving into, immaturity sometimes. I mean, masturbation is fun. But that's what I'm seeing here. And I plan on talking about it profusely in my next book. Because one can have dignity, right, and not have to rob you of dignity. One can have dignity and not basically ruin education, right? I do it all the time. I have tons of dignity. Yep. I don't need to be woke.
Yep.
That's all.
And I was also dismissed, it was like, oh, that's easy for you to say being a white man. It's like, okay. So again, with the intrapersonal, this idea of notice the narrative. And before I forget, I will just say that all of this is on our website for you to check out later on for sure. But notice the narrative. The narrative that we tell ourselves, about other people, about situations, all the time. There's always that voice is going on, right? Whatever it is, like all weekend, I've got this little thing popping up. It was like, did you lock your car? Did you lock your car? So notice the narrative is about disrupting those thoughts of fear and judgment and replacing them with inquiry and compassion. Because fear and judgment, as human beings, fear and judgment, that's our number one reaction to things, because those responses are designed to keep the physical body alive. But in 2021, we're not dealing with the things that our ancestors thousands of years ago have, but we still have this kind of evolutionary baggage with us. So a way to disrupt that in the moment is continually like, so how would I replace fear and judgment with did I lock my car before I locked it off? I started thinking like, well, if somebody maybe they need a place to sleep. Maybe there's something in my car they could eat. Hopefully insurance is going to take care of it, rather than like, oh God. So just really in that moment, how can I replace this with inquiry and compassion?
And noticing that narratives are socially constructed, and we can reconstruct narratives that are more inclusive, a wider we. There is an activist in my neck of the woods, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, named Jonathan Smucker, who wrote a book called Hegemony How To. I strongly suggest you talk about it. He basically talks about wokeness before that word was a thing. Right? And he talks about the need to not get rid of narratives, but to create new ones. And in order to create new ones, you got to think like a writer. Who's the we in this narrative? Who are the protagonists? Who are the antagonists? Who are the ones left out? What are the symbols and ideas that we need? We can create a narrative that is more inclusive. We can do that. We need to do that. So we're not knocking the presence of a victim narrative or something like that. Well, we are, but we're not knocking the idea of a narrative, period. We're promoting the idea of a more inclusive, classically liberal narrative.
And if you notice, the successor ideology, it's asking us to respond with fear and judgment. Like all of us, like fear and judgment is what it inspires and it encourages. So it encourages prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. It encourages all of these negative emotions, and it encourages us to have a thought process primarily with fear and judgment. And again, you want to talk about here? 3
pathways to practice, so let's talk about them. Practices that build awareness and equanimity. Like I said before, a lot of this overlaps with the emotional intelligence, and there are 2 awareness components, basically, to that: social awareness and self-awareness. We have to have them both to work together in ways that will build societal awareness, social awareness, and equanimity. Regarding practices that build kindness and compassion towards self and others, that, again, is the ability to enter into a situation with an open heart, mind, and will, and not with a pre-made idea of who your interlocutor is. It's easier said than done, which is why emotional intelligence is something we need to work on. It's something that needs to be present, not just in schools, in corporate America, right? In parking lot tailgates at football games. Could use it there. I'm an Eagles fan, so we can definitely use it there. Practices that celebrate our common humanity and break the walls of indignity. That goes back to what I was talking about regarding narrative, all right? If we can create a narrative under what Kenneth Burke would call the God term of common humanity, all right, then we're going places. The idea is that what's going on right now is that we're dividing ourselves. We have uncommon humanity, different kinds of humanity. My humanity as a black man is supposed to be different from your humanity as a white person, all right? Once again, stupid, all right? But that seems to be what's happening right now. This is meant to combat that.
And that dignity piece eliminates that.
Yeah.
That with the dignity, there are no colors, there are no genders, there's nothing except for another living being that is worthy just because they exist. If we had 2 days, typically we like to do this in like 2 days with a group. We would spend more time in conversations and more time doing some of these practices. But let's go ahead and do a couple. If you could take your right hand, I pledge it. No, I'm just kidding. Place it right here where you can feel your clavicle. I was a history teacher, so I hope I got that body part right. And just hold your hand there a second. Just see how that feels. Is it calming you a bit? This is a natural calming and soothing and regulation technique. Just simply, when you get stressed, because the world is stressful, put your hand right here. This has become one of my natural resting positions. People think I'm the most patriotic person in the world because I'm walking around the store looking. But this is one of my favorite things to do just for self-regulation. Self-regulation is an important skill. And I'll show you one more thing. And this is a tool. So I used to worked with 8 different middle and high schools in Austin. And there was one day, I do not know what was going on, but I encountered 4 teenagers in crisis. Like crying, emotional, and this one girl, I saw her, I was like, sweetie, I said, I know you don't know me, but can you hold your hands out? And you guys do this right now. Can you hold your hands out? And can you say, peace begins with me? And then I said, can you now take a deep breath, inhale all the way, and then exhale, peace. And that's another self-soothing, self-regulation technique. And in like less than 2 minutes, this young lady went from hysterically crying, could not tell me her name or where she needed to go. I got her in a spot where she told me her name and who she needed to speak with. And then every one of these students, after I was done working with them, I said, listen, I said, you have your breath with you everywhere you go. Your hands are with you everywhere you go. And sometimes everywhere you go is a very stressful situation. So this is something that you can return to before you get to that elevated state. And we talk about self-compassion. We have self-compassion exercises because that's I know for a long time, if I didn't lock my keys, I'd be like, dude, you're a dumbass. Why would you, just like beating myself up over that. Allowing ourselves that grace without letting ourselves off the hook is the key part there. So we also, after we go through some of these exercises, we like to provide working groups time to talk and think about this. What does this mean to you? What would this look like in your community? And have some brainstorming time to develop and work on some things.
Last night, I locked myself out of my hotel room. And I started to beat myself up for a second there. And then I realized, you know what? I can handle this. This can be handled in 3 minutes, and I'll be fine. And at the time, I said, I don't have to tell anybody.
Yep.
But I'm telling you this now to model, emotional intelligence. That happened. It doesn't mean I'm an idiot. It means I made a mistake. This is the difference between self-esteem and what's called positive self-regard. Positive self-regard is looking at yourself fully, your skills, your strengths, your weaknesses, things you need to work on. You're looking at yourself realistically, right? I'm often accused of just abiding by this idea of self-esteem. Self-esteem isn't going to save the world. No, but positive self-regard is a good first step towards saving the world. Right? It goes back to the intrapersonal component of empowerment again. So just wanted to say that.
So back to your locking yourself out, if we look at the common humanity, you also be like, I'm not the only person that's ever locked themselves out of the room. And that's a practice. When I've gone through some really difficult things over the past couple of years, I remind myself, I'm not the only one that's ever lost this. I'm not the only person that's ever done this, and connect to everybody that has experienced love and loss and all of the things that are part of the human condition. So what I want you to think about now, I'm also think about neuroplasticity and our brain's ability to change and our brain's ability to grow, which is wonderful, but also something that strikes me as very concerning is that our brains are wired to adapt to the culture that's placed on us. And if you think about the culture that we're placing on us and the culture that we're starting to place on smaller kids, it's as if we are wiring their brains to be nihilistic, to be cynical, to always see the problem, to want to constantly destroy, be extremely primal, and the individual is worthless.
Yes.
So thinking about neuroplasticity and our brains are wired to adapt to the culture that's placed on us, this is where my heart starts racing, and I need to do this because I realize what is at stake here.
And can we go back to that? It's important to also realize that this is incentivized disempowerment.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you're being rewarded as an upstanding citizen if you abide by these negative traits. I teach a course in American philosophy. Know that it's not a contradiction in terms. All right? And we were talking about Sarah Grimke and her issues and her fight for women's rights in the 1800s. And she complained about this incentivized subjugation, you know, as if the men in her life were saying, it's so great that you just shut up and sit down. That's wonderful. I wish I could do that, but I'm a man. I have to talk and rule things, right? And she doesn't say those words, but she's basically making that argument. It reminds me of this, right? If you see things in this way, if you are defeatist, nihilistic, then you are keeping it real. You're authentic, and we're going to reward you with that by giving you a sense of belonging. And we can talk about the belonging a little bit later on, but just wanted to mention that.
Closing quote. So we're also wired to heal. I have no idea why I'm getting emotional right now.
It's all right.
I think it's like a mid-40s thing.
You're amongst friends. This is a nest.
I think what's going on here is happy and excited because there is an uphill battle, right? There is something waging and raging within all of our communities. But I'm very excited about providing something else. I'm very excited about stopping what's going on and doing something differently. These ideas, there is nothing like this happening in schools. There is nothing like this happening in businesses right now. And that's something that we hope to change because we believe that the more people that understand what's going on and the more people that hear about how we talk about dignity and disrupting mindsets of fear and judgment, and then the 3 pathways of practice, doing that over and over and over, think about what's going to happen to our brains, and then think about what's going to happen to the kids' brains, especially if they start these practices and these thought systems when they're young.
Yes. And we just touched the surface here. We just wanted to let you know the direction in which we're looking, right? Obviously, if we were to, visit a school or a corporation or things like that, things would be a lot more in-depth, a little more profound, something you can really take home with you. We just want to let you know we're here, right?
We're here and we're ready.
We're here and we're ready, and although social emotional learning has been hijacked by the woke, we appreciate what it used to be, and what it used to be is something like this: emotional intelligence, empowerment, the ability or the desire to create a more inclusive narrative. That's what we need to do.
Jason Littlefield and Erec Smith. So we're going to open with questions, and one of the benefits of being a moderator, I can just not look out there and see what they say and just ask what questions I want to ask.
Okay.
There might be hands up. I don't even know because I'm not looking. So you mentioned something about reward. So I think that's interesting, and I want you to talk about the people you talked about them being rewarded for, believing certain types of things and, bad behaviors and things of that nature. But those who are pushing back against all this are getting attacked like you don't care about feelings. And I think it's important to note that we care. It's also important to be concerned about people's feelings. But I think they're also being rewarded and they're creating bad beliefs. So they create this in these kids because they're pushing it and talking about it all the time. They're basically saying, no, right? I joke that you go to a restaurant. I used to be in the restaurant business for years. And people don't know what they want. You have to tell them stuff, right? So you just kind of nod. It's like, no, you want to get this, right? And then you're like, yeah, I do, right? So they're telling the kids, like you're depressed, right? You feel that you're oppressed, right? They're telling them all this negative stuff. And then when they take that on themselves, then we say, okay, now we have to listen to you because these are your feelings and they're important. But we're kind of pushing it on them, right? So is that the reason why some people are getting accused of not caring about their feelings? Their feelings matter, but where are these things coming from? Is there a problem with kind of feeding that stuff into kids?
It's all about how you address those feelings, right? There is a term, I talk about this in my last book, called Prefigurative Politics. Mm-hmm. And what that's supposed to be is acting out the world you want to see. Occupy Wall Street was supposed to be an example of this. They are acting out the world they wanted to see. The problem is prefigurative politics has devolved into membership pride. You're supposed to act out the world you want to see while creating a strategy for bringing it about. But if you show up and you realize, oh, I belong someplace, mm-hmm. I feel good here, people accept me, you stop there. You don't do anything else. You were looking for dignity. Mm-hmm. You were looking for acceptance. You weren't looking to change the world or be a part of this club or that club or whatever. You were looking for that tacitly. And you may not have realized it, and you still may not realize it. And that seems to be going on here a lot, too. People are starved for dignity. They are told, if you feel this way or feel that way, embrace that, and you'll belong with us. And there's that dignity, capital D. Mm-hmm. And it's intoxicating.
Right. And they're sapping them of some of it, right? In the sense that you can have kids, I'm not talking about really young, maybe junior high school, and they may be, let's take black kids, and they could be poor and struggling, but they're focusing on school. The parents are focusing on succeeding, and they don't think that they're oppressed. They don't think there's this, we got good and bad. We struggle with some things, and I have a great life. I know all my friends we had a great life. When we were kids, we didn't think about what other people had. We were focused on what's in front of us, and we had fun. And then you go to school, and you have these teachers no, it's really bad for black people. You're like, no, actually, it's pretty good. And then they say, no, it's really bad. Let me show you some clips of other black people that are having bad lives. This is your life, too. It's like, no, that is kind of bad, but that's not really, let me show you another person. This is your life, and I'm here to try to fix it. And then you start to convince them that things are bad, and now they're like, well, maybe I am oppressed. And so now you created this idea in their mind, and now then you give them a picket sign or marching orders, and then they go march against this thing that didn't exist. So if you really want to fix it, why do you have a problem with them being happy with their lives?
Isn't that supposed to be the point, right?
Right.
Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness?
Right.
There's a...
That's racist.
Right.
Microaggression.
Marcuse, one of the Frankfurt School people, he basically wrote and mentioned several times that the problem with society was that people were too happy. We have to convince them that they're miserable so that we can break this down and build it back up. And
then bring them happiness.
Yeah, or whatever.
In our way.
Right? The problem is that we're realizing, no, we're not oppressed. We're fine. Right. That has to be combated first. Yeah. That's why people who decry racism, white people who decry racism will tell black people, no, you are weak and you can't do math like white people. Right. And which is the irony of the whole thing. Right,
which is in itself racist.
Capital R.
So, one before you, he's got the mic, but you're next. Right. Well, that whole table, everybody's going to ask a question. Oh, okay, Chris.
Thanks.
So long I know everybody's names now.
Yeah. So if I went out on the streets of Boston right now, I could probably find a Louis Vuitton bag for $100. It's not a Louis Vuitton bag, right? So, but it looks like one. It has the same insignia, it has some of the same construction, the same forms. So from an oversight perspective, how does one know, you know, because I could totally picture seeing the same presentation, some of those same diagrams, some of those same forms, but the punchline being a very different thing. And you've talked about how SEL has been co-opted and, you know, is carrying water for the successor ideology. But to someone like me, who's in an oversight role, who doesn't necessarily have the same sophistication, how do I approach that, you know, when it comes up as a pedagogical technique that's used in schools?
I would say anything now that has SEL or social and emotional learning, that brand attached to it, is suspect. Because December of 2020, CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, which is the Amazon of SEL, I guess, they changed the definition of what SEL was. To SEL, or I think they call it now
Transformative
SEL, a lever for equity and social justice. That is from CASEL. So odds are, if it's SEL, it's the successor ideology. That's a general rule of thumb, like going into it, anything that had SEL on it is coming through that pipeline.
And obviously it's so tricky because it overlaps substantially with traditional SEL. Transformative SEL is social and emotional learning insofar as it promotes the successor ideology or critical social justice or something like that. I know I keep talking about my upcoming book.
Do it.
Right? It's relevant.
I got one coming.
In that book, I call this sophistic social emotional learning. The sophists were the people with whom Socrates argued with in the dialogues, right? Apparently, the sophists get a bad rap, but in those dialogues, they were people who were happy with manipulating language, and they didn't care about truth, they cared about power and things like that. I'm reminded of that when I look at transformative SEL. Yep. It's sophistic SEL, and we have to watch out for that.
And I would guess that they would have similar things, but the books and the Venn diagram would probably be a lot different.
Like they talk about, self-care is now collective self-care. And I asked, how do I take care of how do I do that?
All the yous, the collective yous.
And I never got any answers. Like
now I put myself on the pressure because I said I knew names. Dexter?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I guess I had two daughters that went to Boston Latin here in the city of Boston. And one of them, and when you said the ideology is designed to erode relationships and make people unhappy, I knew exactly what you were talking about. And one of my daughters went off to the University of Arizona, largely, I think, to escape the whole craziness of the Northeast because of the woke ideology. And I think that she's still internalized a fair amount of it, but she's gone completely, she's done what she could to flee it. The other daughter understood that it was crazy and was able to basically keep it at bay in large part because she read some of the books by Jonathan Haidt and The Coddling of the American Mind. I don't know where she got those books, but the thing is that the atmosphere that I feel that we're in American society right now is kind of like what was described in The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, where basically everybody hates each other, okay? And when I saw you go through some of these exercises, it was like listening to Father Zosima. And one of the things I said, you should give him Alyosha's prayer. And I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but Google it. Because the thing is that it was like Dostoevsky understood. And is there a way to actually reach into the Western canon to basically kind of like get back to kind of settle down the craziness and respond to the misery that they're inflicting on us? Also, Albert Bandura, Toward a Psychology of Human Agency. I don't know if you've read that, but I read that and because it's not, it's not, when people complain about victim blaming, maybe we should respond and say, well, you're doing victim rewarding. That's what you're doing. And then also, any of you who are tourists here, you need to go to Mount Auburn Cemetery, and I'm sorry, this looks like it's coming out of left field. But that cemetery was designed with an idea to basically calm people and give people the ability to contemplate the transcendent, okay? And so, and maybe that would actually be a way we can get out from under the craziness that these woke people are inflicting on us.
And how do you focus on the Western canon when the Western canon is racist?
Right. Dexter, is it? Yeah. I just want to say I'm going to use that victim rewarding, victim blaming dichotomy thing, and I will cite you.
Yep.
All right? I'll see you later on to get your full name and all that stuff, unless you don't want to be cited, because...
Oh, I wanted.
Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, over the past few years, almost every superintendent conference at my district has really focused on SEL. And I was wondering, why are we focusing so much? And it was a primer for what's happening now. So I find out that our school district has adopted the Morningside Center, SEL. I've tried to dive into it to see, how they hijacked it. And I learned that my district has to use 20% of the American Rescue Plan from Biden to have SEL in our schools. So I'm just wondering, how do I get past? Yeah. I don't know how the district got where they bypassed the vote to have Morningside Center. There was no other options. So what could you recommend to other districts, other people from their school districts? How can we, get past that?
Call me. I would love to talk to school leaders, talk to school boards, like have a professional conversation. That's been the thing that I've been hungry for the past few years, is to just have a professional conversation about our field and what's happening in our field. And I don't really, if people want to choose nihilism and cynicism over pursuing truth, beauty, and goodness, that's fine. Right. But I feel that more people, if they realize this is what is at stake, this is the argument, it's not Republican and Democrat and left and right and CRT is good and CRT is bad. This is about the continuation of the idea of a free individual. That's it. If you believe, are you a builder or are you a destroyer? Do you believe that the individual is the moral worth of society, or do you believe it's the group? And if you believe it's the group, which group? Is it a national group? Is it a religious group? Is it a racial group? And then what's the pecking order of the other groups? To ask those questions to school leaders. Because I think most people think that this is a continuation of the civil rights movement. This is what the trusted adults are saying, so it must be right.
Right.
Deborah.
I think if we learned something these last 2 days, it's that a lot depends on the person you hand this stuff to. So you two are standing up there talking, we're like, this is fabulous, this is wonderful, but we're responding to you, the two of you personally, not just these slides. I mean, the slides are great. Right. But what we've learned is that there is a dramatic difference between teachers who really do buy into all the stuff on the left or are free thinkers and all that and value that, and teachers who for whatever reason aren't or don't. And one of the reasons we're in the crisis we're in is that the majority of teachers, due to a set of incentives we've discussed over the last 2 days, are not like you guys at all. So when, where, and by whom would even something as wonderful as this be put into a school? Because I think that really makes like almost 100% of the difference. If you could take 1984, right? Or forget that, if you could take The Great Gatsby, it's literally my favorite novel in the American literature scene, and teach that through a critical theory lens, I don't doubt they could take these amazing ideas and twist it and turn it into something just like they did with SEL. I think that was what the gentleman was asking over there. How do we get the people to be right in the head to do this in the first place?
Can I do that? You're going to have a better answer, but my preface will be nice.
Get it.
To your better answer.
Get it.
I'm gonna get it. I talk about what's called improvement science with my students because I have them do problem-based learning, which is looking at the world as it is and working with a problem together. I can talk about that for hours, but I won't. And I tell them over and over again that improvement is kairotic. Kairotic comes from the term kairos, which means the confluence of time, place, audience, subject matter, people, and that changes from situation to situation. If improvement is kairotic, that means that what works for this school may not work for this school, what works for this corporation may not work for this corporation. It has to be contingent upon the dynamics of that particular place. First and foremost, there's not a magic bullet here.
I feel like how I talked about dignity, and there's a one-pager on our website about dignity. There's no getting around that. There's no unless you're a male, unless you're a white person, you know, and then disrupting fear and judgment and replacing them with inquiry and compassion. I don't know what the loophole would be for somebody to be a jerk and destroy somebody. When we talk about, so the practices that build awareness, we talk about aim, alignment, and awe. So I don't know what the workaround would be for what are you aiming for, and is your aim aligned with your personal values, because your values will help you reach your aim. And then what is your awe? How is your aim connected to something bigger than you? Like, I don't know what the workaround would be, except for people that just want to destroy everything, and they're going to figure out a way to destroy everything. But I firmly believe that a consistent message of love and dignity and compassion in the face of nastiness. And that's what my past 3 years, I have been living in the nastiness world while tinkering on this and working on this in my garage and trying to, not really in my garage, and trying to share this information. And I shared with my colleagues, I've put this out, and they don't criticize it at all. There is nothing, and you know, if they found something wrong with it, they would definitely let me know. But I have received no pushback from them on these ideas because I think they know it's true. I think they know that we all want dignity. We all want to be able to live our lives and to help other people.
And the last question, and I want to say that to the people online that they are wearing name tags, but I tell you, I can't see them, right? We can't see them. I'm doing this out of memory, Susie.
We're all very impressed.
Thank you.
Yes.
So your talk about self-esteem, and you called it positive self-regard.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the connection between that and the actual building of competencies, which seems to be what our children aren't getting, and they're using this other, it's not what you're doing, but they're using this SEL to sort of try to shore up their self-esteem, but there's nothing that the kids are building to actually feel pride about, to feel dignity about, because they aren't acquiring a set of skills that's going to be helpful to them. You know, the building of skills, the mastery of a skill is what makes you feel proud of what you have accomplished. And then, like, sort of part two and kind of connected is, to what degree is critical social justice and its praxis a kind of attempt to project a mass Munchausen syndrome onto our youth?
All right, that's a huge question.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to address the first half anyway. And I guess I can address the second half too, but this has to be a tandem situation here. Positive self-regard is a competency of the general emotional intelligence competence of self-management. it goes along with a few other competencies. One of those competencies is achievement orientation, which is basically the complete opposite of learned helplessness. It teaches kids how to create motivation, to self-motivate, to have not just extrinsic reward, but intrinsic reward. It does that. That's the purpose of it. Another co-competency with positive self-regard is adaptability. The ability to, roll with the punches, as it were, to go into a new situation and not freak out, right? These are skills that some people are born with, okay? I've always been somebody who could just show up anywhere, Like, I'd crash parties in cities I didn't know, because I'm that kind of guy. But most people need to work on these things, right? And this is what, I wish Greg was still here. This is a lot of what CBT is trying to do, cognitive behavioral therapy. You have to work on this. There's literally homework for it, So that's not what's going on, and I think we need to remember those competencies, right? We're focusing too much on the big picture, not those small ideas. Regarding Munchausen syndrome, I almost wrote an article about this, for whoever would have published it. And I called the whole thing like a Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen by proxy, or something like that. And the reason why I didn't write that op-ed is because I didn't know what I was talking about. So I can't answer your question.
I will say I am definitely not an advocate of elevating self-esteem. That's a very dangerous thing, is inflating false self-esteem. Right. And in fact, so from 94 to 98, I worked in early childhood. And then in 2001, I became a parent for the first time. And I started noticing the trends. And I wondered, in the late 90s, I was like, oh my God, this generation is being socially engineered to be the C word, commies. It's just a thought that I had. And then I recently heard a therapist, a psychiatrist, talking that those that are most prone to the ideology had their self-esteem inflated in their early childhood. So it's a lot of interesting.
And that's why the term is positive self-regard and not positive self-esteem. Any schmuck can have positive self-esteem, right? Positive self-regard is more realistic, and it's more empowering.
Yep. And most educators now are like, oh yeah, that self-esteem movement was bad. I'm like, this one is too. Let's just say it now.
Right. So let's thank them, Jason Littlefield for Empowered Ed Pathways, Erec Smith, Free Black Thought.